Hi everyone. This episode is not meant for most people. Most of the people at this channel do not care to know how or why Jesus is Messiah. Whether he has a Davidic heir or not is irrelevant to most of you. You've assumed all your life a virgin birth account poses no problem, and I'm not here to make you doubt that if that's what you want to believe. But if you have to evangelize a Jewish person, they'll bring it up because they know that the Second Samuel says the Messiah must come from the flesh of the line of David, not the line of David's mom or the wife of a Davidic heir. It has to be from the line of David. And so we at this channel have presented videos on that topic. That was an original belief of the early church, that he had to come from a Davidic heir, and they were very upset at the virgin birth account when it was first announced in apparently the late 100s or early 200s. Somebody made a Greek translation from the Hebrew, and the Ebionite church was up in arms and saying, hey, they misconstrued this passage about Isaiah 7:14 to be about a virgin when it's really about a young woman. It has nothing to do with, Jesus had to come from a virgin. So somebody creatively translated from the Hebrew Matthew into Greek, and they were upset. But most Christians don't care about it, and I'm not here to make you feel you need to resolve it unless you want to evangelize Jewish people. Now, here's the thing is, so Deo came back and something I said, and he said that the argument that I was making is faulty because Justin Martyr, who died in 165 AD, did not say Joseph begat Jesus in the particular work I cited. And I did make a mistake citing the wrong work of Justin Martyr, but there is a correct citation. So I have to correct that and make sure people know that the citation I gave is incorrect and what is the correct citation. And we'll go to that next. So here's Deo's posting on May 17th, and he wrote, I did this search on the first apology of Justin Martyr. Again, Jacob begat Joseph was not found. So I'm going to show him where it correctly belongs and to anyone else who is interested in this topic. All right, so in the prior video on this, I had given the dates of Justin Martyr and his works, Dialogue with Trypho and First Apology, and that was incorrect. And so he was looking at First Apology, and I had said that is the passage where it says, Jacob begat Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus, and who was called the Christ, and Joseph begat Jesus, who was called the Christ. And I cited Charles Harris, Pro Fide, Defense of Natural and Revealed Religion, page 507. So if you go to that work, it has the right reference to the right work of those two works. All right, so if you go to Charles Harris and you look at his page 507, he says there, it is stated in the Sinai Syriac text, so that's Matthew 1, verse 16. There's no dispute about that. It says Joseph begat Jesus there, and Deo doesn't dispute that either. And that work, Deo does question why am I dating it to the first to the second century? Because all the evidence proves that the virgin birth account was not in play originally, and it was just begat Jesus, and that only first emerges like in the late 100s, early 200s for the reasons I've already stated. So historically, a work that says just begat Jesus was being systematically wiped out at a certain point in time, and the only things that could have possibly survived are those things before the 200s. And so something late after the 200s would have never even been published. It was being basically censored out of existence. So so that's why you can date it by virtue of what it actually says in the text. The text itself, I think we made clear, is from a later era, meaning that it was written in 687. You have someone writing a book over it. So if you looked at the letters on the page, the handwriting of the people who are copying a different book over the New Testament are going to have a different handwriting for the 6th or 7th century. And some people foolishly try to date it from that thing. Well, that only tells you what had the paper was used centuries after it was first used, but the document underlying it clearly is a text, the earliest text of the New Testament, 4 Gospels, and it does date from the 100s to the early 200s, and that's how it was dated by the people who found it and who are experts from Cambridge. And so I put more credence in them than people who are they're aware of what's in it and they don't like it, so they're willing to date it as late as they possibly can. So it doesn't have the earmarks of being originally from the 4th or 5th century. Let's just put it that way. Anyway, so in this work, Harris says that beyond the Sinai Syriac, it does say Joseph begat Jesus in the reading confirmed in the Justin Martyr's Dialogue of Timothy and Aquila. Justin Martyr, you have to know, is somebody who repeatedly refers to an early version of the Gospel of Matthew, and it's some people call it the original Matthew. So this is even more ancient than the Greek Matthew that you and I read or are all familiar with, and it has a lot of other variants than we don't normally see, which were commonly known in that era. And this was translated by Jerome in the 380 to 393 period, and he was elated by it. He said in one point, he said most people believe that it is the authentic original, and he obviously did, because he took all the time to translate it from Hebrew into Latin, and he translated also into Greek. It's a mystery why it's completely lost. He loved it to the extent that he quoted it 22 different times, the Hebrew Matthew, in his commentary on the book of Matthew. So to help elucidate or clarify what certain passages really meant and might have been mistranslated in the Greek, he said. So anyway, that is who Justin Martyr is. He is very familiar with the very first gospel, the very first Hebrew Matthew that was in the church. And then he says Joseph begat Jesus, which tells you what likely the original church said was its gospel, said in its gospel of Jesus Christ. All right. And then under here, the footnote 1 says the dialogue, meaning the dialogue between Timothy and Aquila, says Jacob begat Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus, who is called Christ. So none of this virgin or any of these other kind of words that would be laid over even later versions of the same thing would say, and was born of a virgin. Okay, this doesn't even say that. And that would be in, when you go to the Syriac Sinaiticus, it's moving away from this original wording, and I think it says, and it was the husband of Mary. Wait, Jacob begat Joseph, the husband of Mary, of a virgin from whom was born Jesus, who is called Christ. So there was even then still resistance to get rid of Jesus having a Davidic lineage, but wanted to call Mary a virgin for some reason. Okay, so anyway, let's move on, and I want to show you how this is discussed in another text. Okay, now it turned out it was very hard to find this original text that Cornwallis had written, but I had to try to dig it up, and I found it by going to what's called the Curetonian Syriac Bible. This is in a book called Evangelion de Mafareshe, and by Burkitt, and he has 2 volumes, and this was in volume 2 at page 265. This is a work from 1904. It's useful for us to all have. And I have provided, whenever people ask me for the Agnes Lewis versions of the New Testament, which are those the 4 Gospels alone. That's all it is, but it is the oldest version of the 4 Gospels that exists. And then the next oldest is the Cureton. So you're moving just a little bit further up and away from the Syriac Sinaiticus, and now you're moving into the Cureton Sinaiticus, and that's what this one is. And so anyway. Now, I'm going to read you something it says at page 265 about the Cornwallis work in that language we were talking about. Here it is. So this is page 265. And this is important because if I showed you the ultimate text is all in Greek, and you're not going to understand anything, you're not going to understand anything it's saying. So let's read this, and it'll give you a synopsis and actually a translation of what is in the ultimate text to look at. More important are and I want to tell you who F.C. Conybeare is. Conybeare is a professor of New Testament at Oxford University, and that's a huge honor to work at Oxford. So there's 2 universities in England that have the authority to print separately the publication known as the King James Bible. So for him to be a New Testament professor at Oxford means he's able to be one of the editors, as that is continually revised and edited over time and then released to the public of England. So he says, more important are the variations found. So this is Burkitt writing in 1904. More important are the variations found in the dialogue of Timothy and Aquila by Justin Martyr, edited by F.C. Conybeare, Oxford, 1898. In this dialogue, Matthew 1:16 is quoted 3 times. The third of these is at page 88. Is obviously based on the common text and is interesting only as an example of how loosely and inaccurately the writer quotes the New Testament. It runs. Now, I want to say this is he is not thinking if Justin Martyr is quoting from the earliest New Testament, the Hebrew Matthew, then it's really the later Greek translator who is loosely and inaccurately translating the original Hebrew Matthew. And it's very clear Justin Martyr is looking at the Hebrew Matthew and a more original text. But it just goes to show you how biases of people will be dumped in there, and they won't want to admit that what they're looking at is an authentic, more original version of readings of the New Testament. Anyway, so I'm going to skip any of that material, but I just wanted you to know how he is putting down the New Testament version that Justin Martyr is looking at. Okay. But Justin Martyr, by the way, he dies in 165, so he's looking at the earliest text. The second quotation is in rapid recapitulation of the genealogy. So this is where it talks about the Joseph begat Jesus, page 76, and runs. We'll just skip all the Greek. This is chiefly interesting as affording an actual proof of the phrase husband of Mary was liable to change. The first quotation, also on page 76, is more striking. It is put into the mouth of the Jew, and to gain an idea of the context, it is necessary to quote more fully. The Christian says, quote, yes, from Abraham Jesus derives his flesh. The Jew says, how was he born? Tell me his genealogy. The Christian says, thine own mouth has declared it when reading the Old and New Testament, and dost thou not know this? Question mark. The Jew says, there is a genealogy in the Old Testament, and in the New there is one in Matthew. And it runs thus, Jacob begat Joseph, the husband of Mary, from whom was born Jesus that is called Christ. And so Joseph begat Jesus that is called Christ, about whom we are talking. It says he begat him from Mary. Period. So the Jew is simply acknowledging the Davidic lineage of Jesus at this point. So we don't need to go into any more depth, but that is the question. So the Jewish person cares about that. Gentiles don't care, but Jewish people do. So he's trying to see if the Christian understands the significance of that fact. Okay, and most Christians don't. So that's just the fact of life, and I'm not going to change anybody's mind about it. I've tried. Most people don't care, and that's fine. But we need to know the Jewish person doesn't. That even back in 165 A.D., the Jewish people cared and wanted to make sure Christians understood that this is important and what does that mean, and try to explain what the word Christ even means. It means Messiah. It means the person who is a Davidic lineage heir to the throne of David. The kings are all anointed with oil, and so that was the whole point of being a Messiah. You would be anointed with oil, which means you're to be the king. Okay. Now, again, I wanted to just show you who Frederick Cornwallis Conybeare is before I show you his work. He, again, is a professor of theology at the University of Oxford. He lived from 1856 to 1924, and so I was trying to find out where can I find his work, and you can see how detailed you have to be to try to find stuff. So I figured it out eventually it was inside of a work called Anecdota Oxoniensia from 1898, and it was combined with another dialogue between Athanasius and Zacchaeus. So he had put these two dialogues in the same book inside of a journal book. So eventually I did find it. It took a long time to find. So I didn't want to not pursue this to the nth degree to figure it out for purposes of responding to Deo. Anyway, so that's it. And it gave the pages, and it was talking about Justin. Okay, Justin Martyr. Okay, so this is the work that it's published in: Anecdota Oxoniensia, the text, documents, and extracts chiefly from manuscripts in the Bodleian and other Oxford libraries. Now, one thing you need to know is that if you go to other translations of this work, the one I'm talking to you about, Aquila, what's the name of the work again? Timothy and Aquila. They won't have the translation Joseph begat Jesus, just so you know. So check that out. But there's a reason, because they don't have the oldest, best manuscript. And that's what Frederick Cornwallis Conybeare, professor of New Testament at Oxford, could get by going to the source, the Vatican. Now, by the way, the Vatican probably has all along known there was a version, an older version, that has the problem text that they don't really like, which is Joseph begat Jesus. So what texts are they releasing? They're releasing Latin texts. So Latin texts have been translated, and that all omit Joseph begat Jesus. But when you go back to the earliest Greek text, there it was. And so he finds that, and that's why it's preserved. So, but for this man, we wouldn't have it. And you're going to see, he's going to tell you with the greatest detail how he got the earliest, oldest manuscripts. Let's do this. And this is published in 1898. And he goes through what is he doing? He's going after Bodleian and Oxford libraries, but he's also going to the Vatican, as you'll see. And he gets a little prolegomena, and these are two anti-Jewish dialogues. Now, anti-Jewish is too strong a word, I think. Somebody who's trying to evangelize to Jews is therefore attacking their lack of faith in Jesus Christ. So it doesn't always mean they're anti in the sense of, you're like in an ethnic sense, but opponent, because the other side is not wanting to concede who Jesus is and is being strict on you, the Gentile. You have to prove certain things, and wants to make sure you're up to the task. So anyway, and so here's where he gets into the detail. This is page XI of his summary of his introduction to this work. The dialogue of Timothy and Aquila, Conybeare writes, to which I shall refer as TA, so TA means Timothy and Aquila, is taken from a codex in the Vatican, number 47 of the Codices Graecae Pi PP Roman numeral 2, described on page 164 of Signor Enrico Stevenson's catalog, Rome, 1888, as member in 1606. I don't know what, I'm not sure what SAEC is supposed to stand for. Maybe it's sacerdote or priest. XII, folio 153. So this is very detailed, highly specific. He's gone after one particular Vatican document. The greater part of the volume, apart from the dialogue, consists of grammatical matter taken from Dionysius Thrax and Theodosius of Alexandria. This fills folios 2 through 66. So it's very precise. And then he goes through similar details below that. And I'll just read you here. He said, the Vatican copy is well written and is so legible that I have been able to transcribe it from photographs. So he didn't even have to go to the Vatican to get it. He just got photographs. The other thing is, people, Dale was saying, hey, how do you know this is an old first from the 100s or the mid 100s or even the early 200s? How do you know that? Well, part of it is what is written here at page LVI. It's constant use. So TA, meaning tequila and tequila. I got to go back. Timothy and Aquila. I don't know why I put the two together and made it tequila, but it's Timothy and Aquila. All right. Anyway, so I don't like tequila. I just want you to know, but the sound of it was making me think of what it was. I was trying to use a mnemonic to remember it. Okay, it's constant use. TA's constant use of an archaic form of the gospel, meaning of the Matthaic gospel. These characteristics mostly are absent in AZ, which is the other text he's doing at the same time. He's doing I think it's Athanasius and what's the other one here? I got to go back. Athanasius and Zacchaeus. Okay, that's the other dialogue he's translating at the same time. That's a different author, as I recollect. So he is saying that it's so distinctly different. He can tell the difference between these two, which one is earlier and which one is later, obviously what he's leading up to. that this one has an archaic form of the gospel. It's quoting that Hebrew Matthew. These characteristics mostly absent in the Athanasius and Zacchaeus indicate that it preserves better than Athanasius and Zacchaeus the lost common basis. So the lost common basis is that work I was mentioning, the Hebrew Matthew. It's lost. Jerome had preserved it. Jerome had translated it. The early church was preserving it in a library in Caesarea along the coast of Israel. And it made it a library where scholars could come in and make copies and read it. And so this was a very well-known document of early Christianity. And it's shocking to me that the historians of Protestantism don't want to know about it. The Roman Catholics don't want to know about it, but it is a fact of history that is well documented. It's astonishing. And so here you have a scholar who knows this is important. And he's saying, hey, Justin Martyr is using language that reflects back at this older text, the more archaic, as he puts it, the archaic form of the gospel. All right, I think that's basically it. And here I've showing you. Here is the Greek text that he's re-establishing. So he's not trying to translate any of it. He's just simply on the right side on page 76. He's just trying to preserve what it says in Greek. So you have to know Greek, and you have to go through this, and it would take hours to go through, do all this translation. Over on the left, we have a translation that was made in the commentary on this in the prior work I mentioned, and that's why we know what it says, and we know the dialogue, and it's down here if you wanted to read the dialogues around this area. Okay, so I think that helps. And so I think I've answered the question that Deo had. Yes, you're right. It is not in the first apology of Justin Martyr, but it is in the dialogue of Timothy and Aquila. And I haven't verified yet whether it is. I gave you two references, so let me just see what was the other one. So I will double check and see. So it is not. It is not in first apology. Apparently, is where you were looking. Let me see where you were looking. You were looking at first apology. So it's not apparently there. I did look there. Looking at earlychristianwritings.com, they did not have the begat being between Joseph and Jesus. So the one left to double check is I'm going to look at dialogue with Trypho, and I'll get back to you on that one. But clearly, it does exist in the oldest. Clearly, anything Justin Martyr's writing, we have to understand he is really the first commentator of Christianity, the earliest commentator. So after the disciples and the apostles, the next major writer that comes up on the scene is Justin Martyr, and he is the earliest evangelist, the earliest writer of Christianity beyond the apostles. So this is why he's an important figure to know where was the Gospels, what did they say? And we know he's saying it said Joseph begat Jesus. And if you are one who wants to evangelize Jewish people, thank God he did that. Thank God he preserved it, because we have to, and that's what's so blessed by Agnes Lewis finding the earliest manuscript of Christianity of the four Gospels, and that is the Syriac Sinaiticus palimpsest, and that is the oldest because it matches Justin Martyr. So Justin Martyr confirms the Syriac Sinaiticus of Agnes Lewis is the oldest because it has the oldest reading. The most archaic reading of Matthew is Joseph begat Jesus, and many other references that Mr. Conybeare is trying to say is also going on simultaneously. So we know we're reading the earliest Christian documents. Okay, God bless everybody. Take care. Ciao, bye.